So this is the next new central character, Matchbox Jag E-Type. It's about 20 years old, so it's quite an old model, but of a really old car. What I want to do with this is it's occurred to me that while I have covered mirror polishing in several of the videos, it's just in there as part of a longer process, and there isn't actually I wanted to make an actual standalone video of just the mirror polishing process, i.e. taking a casting that's just come out of the stripper, and it's sort of rough, tarnished looking state with chips of paint still on it, and getting it to that chrome look that you can then either have it as it is, just keep it like a chrome example, or you can do further things with it. So if you're familiar with my other videos, you'll know this is the first stage. Attack it viciously with the metal toothbrush. You shouldn't need to do that for too long. That's mainly to get rid of any bits of paint that the stripping process didn't get off, and then going into the lines of the body just to get anything that's still on there after the vicious metal toothbrush process. Anything that's still there, just get rid of that. Then onto the rough grade of the wire wool. Again, viciously attack with this. This will also get rid of any stray bits of paint, but it will also this is what starts to actually put the kind of chrome-like shine onto it. This is the very first suggestion that you get that the metal can actually end up as shiny as it does. You can see it happening now, right before your very eyes. This is another video that's kind of in real time, so everything that I did pretty much is on the camera, so it is all just unfolding. I've tried to tidy up the odd little bit here and there, bits where I kind of wasn't doing anything for a few seconds, or had just put everything down inexplicably for a few seconds before starting again. I've tried to tidy it up here and there just to try and lessen the tedium a little bit. It's not going to get rid of the tedium. The tedium's still going to be there. There's no doubt about that. But it might just make it a little bit of a less laborious thing to watch. So we've gone from like I said, you don't really need to use the rough wire wool for that long. We're on to the finer wire wool now, where this is where you actually start to get. This is where you first start to legitimately see some of the chrome-like shine coming through. This is where it's actually worth starting what I would call a structured method of doing this, where you use each abrasive element that you move on to. You concentrate using it on a particular area for around about 10 seconds. About 10 seconds is good, or 20 seconds, whichever. But if you do it that way, so like we're on to the 1000 grit pad now. If you just saw then, that was 10 seconds with the 1000 grit pad, and now the front is noticeably shinier and more mirror-like than it was before. So we do the same again on the roof. I mean, I'm not saying it's exactly 10 seconds, but it's roughly 10 seconds on the roof and I am applying a fair bit of pressure here. You know, you can't really tell that in the video, but there is a bit of pressure there. And you see it's noticeably smoother. So the structure is 10-second or 20-second bursts on each thing that you're using. So we're at the 1000 grit pad at the moment, so different areas of the car, different specific areas of the car, just give them that 10 seconds or that 20 seconds, and then look, and you'll be able to see the difference. And when it gets to the point that you're giving it 10 seconds on an area and you're not seeing any difference, that's when it's time to move on to the next thing. So the next thing in this case is this 1500 grit flexi sander. So that's just to get into the complicated curves a little bit more. I mean, to be fair, the pad is very good at getting into complicated curves, but the flexi sanders, they're stiffer, and they're obviously smaller, and they seem to be able to just get to some parts a little bit better. An alternative to these, if you don't know anywhere that sells these, or you can't get hold of them or whatever, an alternative to this is just a little square of actual wet and dry paper like 1500 grit, or, well, in this case, yeah, 1500 grit, or you can get it up to 3000. If I'm completely honest, I could do all this with the pads. I bought the little flexi sanders just to try them out. They turned out to be very good. They're just in a lot of ways they're just as good as the pads. So I just use them in conjunction with each other, because obviously less time spent using the 1000 grit pad is less wear on that pad, and that will last longer, etc., etc. Just basically just trying to get some use out of them because I've bought them. So we're on to the 2000 grit pad now. So again, same routine. 10 seconds or 20 seconds, whichever way you want to do it, of vigorous sanding. Because this is vigorous, by the way. I mean, you can't really see this from the video, but certainly with the initial attacks, using the metal toothbrush and the wire wool, you've got to keep the pressure up. You've got to put a bit of blood and muscle into it. Of course, it gets easier as you go along. You don't have to. You still need to put the pressure up and keep the momentum up and keep it going, but you don't. It's not quite as physically exerting as it is earlier on, purely because there's less resistance being given by the body because it's getting smoother and smoother. So there's not as much drag as it goes along like a 3000 grit sanding pad as there would be when it goes along a 1000 grit sanding pad. So it does get easier, but you've still got to keep up this effort, this kind of pace, if you really want the result to turn out well. I'd say the 1000 and the 2000 grit pads are probably the ones that you'll use for the longest period of time. So there you see I've got the 2000 grit finger sander out there, sanding board, whatever you want to call it, and then I've decided to put it down and use a piece of 2000 grit paper instead. If only these simple creatures could tell us what they were thinking. So yeah, I must have decided that was just a better thing for getting in between the sort of bulge that runs along the front and the kind of the sort of flutes that the headlights are in. And I picked this car because I think it's a design that will particularly suit this kind of treatment, just because it's kind of very curvy and sort of almost like bar of soap shaped. Really, I don't mean that as any kind of disrespect to the design of the E-Type or anything, but it is a bit like a bar of soap at the edges. A very nice bar of soap, but yeah. But it's all those lovely compound curves that it's got all over it that'll give this treatment its impact once it's done, because the light, especially like sunlight, will just play up on all those curves in a way that perhaps it wouldn't do with a boxier or a simpler design. So it looks like I've found the going a bit easier using 2000 grit paper rather than the 2000 grit pad. But it would seem just on this front end, it might be the vents or whatever, or some other kind of feature that's making the pad perhaps not get to everywhere that the paper will. And so I've gone up to 2500 grit now as well, which is a perfectly good halfway house, because the next pad that we're going to be using is going to be 3000 grit. So this is all just kind of, every stage that you do with this, you're making ready for the next stage. We're getting the ground ready for the next pad. So we're making sure that when the 3000 grit pad comes along, it hasn't got any work to do that it's not going to be capable of doing, i.e. there isn't anything left that the 2000 grit pad should have done. If that makes any sense, that's kind of how I think of it. So in a rare show of coherency, I'm actually going into the that bulge area, in that vent area that's complicated, with the 3000 grit flexi sander, because in anticipation of the fact that the 3000 grit pad that's coming next might not quite be able to get into it. Or at least I think that's what I was doing. So yeah, so we're on to the 3000 grit pad now, so I obviously feel like it's ready for that. So again, sticking to the structure, 10-second bursts, and then have a look and see how much difference that 10 seconds has made. I've got to admit, as I'm putting the voiceover onto this, I'm watching the footage at the same time, and I can actually see the thing visually getting more and more shiny and mirror-like before my very eyes. So hopefully this video is actually going to do what I intended it to do. But yeah, it's important to have a structure for this. If you want the best results, and if you want it doing by a certain time. I know that sounds a bit strange, doesn't it? Because it's supposed to be a hobby. Why would you want it done by a certain time? But you know, if you've not got that much time to spare, if you've got an hour to do something like this before you've got to go to work or something like that, you might just want to set off for work thinking, I've managed to do that in its entirety. So if you've got this little bit of a structure, this whole thing should take about 20 minutes all told. And in a minute, I mean, we're on to the bit now where we're using the pads that are barely got any grit on them at all now. I've been calling them 8,000 grit, 9,000 grit. I don't know what they are now. It might be 12,000 grit for all I know. I know they still make a difference. I know there's definitely something still there. They haven't completely deteriorated to the point where they're just literally sponge pads that do nothing. So I will still keep using them at the end, because the higher the grit that you finish with, the better the result's going to be. That's a guy suddenly tailing off mid-sentence. So yeah, coming up, I'll show you what the difference is between doing this in the structured way that I've been showing you throughout this video, and doing it in a sort of casual, watching a load of nonsense on TV sort of way, which is fine. I mean, but this it's a body of a Matchbox Group C Sauber. This was done in a casual, watching a load of nonsense on the TV sort of way, and that's fine. I'd do it like that all the time. If I'm just watching something and want something to do with my hands, I'll just pick one of these up and start doing something like this with it. But you can see it wasn't as smooth and mirror-like as the E-Type is now, and the E-Type's taken about 20 minutes max, and I probably got through, I don't know, 2 or 3 episodes of some load of rubbish doing the other one. And it wasn't anywhere near as shiny. So anyway, this is what we've ended up with. So it's got to where it needs to be. Now, the thing that you'd do as a final stage on this, which I'm not going to do on this one because I've got other plans for it, is to just put some lacquer on. Just to put a quick coat of lacquer on. That will seal in that shine. Because if you don't, if you go back to it in a couple of months, it might have started to tarnish or whatever. If you put some lacquer on, that generally doesn't happen. So in the interests of completion and showing the process from start to finish, I'm not going to lacquer this one because, like I say, I have other plans for it. But the Group C, which should be coming back to us round about now, I've taken it through the process, so it has been polished properly now. And I'm going to lacquer this one, just like I say, just to show you how it's done. And it's just a few bursts, like I say, quick bursts. It should settle very nicely and evenly, given the smoothness of the surface, because obviously lacquer will always dry smoother on smoother surfaces. If lacquer dries dull, it's because the surface underneath is dull. If it's smooth, it'll turn out smooth. So there's the E-Type. I did say I had other plans for it. There will be another video on that, on its completion. But there we go. That takes us to the end of this process for mirror polishing. Thanks for watching.